Hello and welcome to the Breaking Muscle podcast. In this season, we take the show on a European tour, interviewing the top minds in the fitness industry from all over Europe to help educate, motivate, and inspire you to take your training to the next level. I'm your host, Tom McCormick, and today I'm joined by Borge Fagerli. His background as an engineer and later on as an entrepreneur and CEO has enabled him to put his methods into a step-by-step system that can transform your health, appearance, and your performance, both mentally and physically. Borge has been in the industry for over 20 years and is the creator of Myo-reps, one of the most time-efficient and effective training strategies to pack muscle on. As a 45-year-old father and business owner, I pick his brains on how busy guys can achieve exceptional results without having to live in the gym and miss out on life. In this episode, we go in depth on what actually causes muscles to grow, training frequency and volume, effective reps, junk volume, maximizing your return on investment with training, and Myo-reps. We also get a shocking revelation about him. So, without further delay, it's on with the podcast. Okay, so Borge Fagerli here, who I've just, believe it or not, I've practiced, guys. I've practiced, and that was probably horrific. How bad was that? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being great and 1 being awful, did I even make a 1 with my pronunciation there?
I think you're at an 8, actually. I've had a lot worse, believe me.
He's trying to get on side already. Get in favour. All right, guys, so if you don't know about this guy, then you're missing out. There's some fantastic information online to read. I would do some research there, but hopefully you're going to get to know a little bit more about his world, his approach to training. Some of it is a little bit different to what you may have heard before. And today we're really going to look about being efficient and maximizing your results in the gym, but still having a life outside of it. So before we do that, could you give the listeners a little bit more background about yourself? You've been around in the industry for a while, and the path that you've trodden to get to this point.
Sure. I got interested in training at a very young age, around 10, 11 years of age or something. My dad bought me something called a bull worker. I don't know if you have even heard of that.
No.
It's like this isometric tension kind of thing where, it's like a spring-loaded mechanism with bands you can pull. Yeah. No, not that one.
No.
It's like a long steel rod kind of thing with handles at each end, so you can push it together, and then there are bands attached to the sides so you can pull it apart as well. So that was kind of the start, and obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger being the inspiration, as probably a lot of people even today are inspired by.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got access to, because I come from a very little town, so we didn't really have a training studio or gym or anything like that. But there was this old boxing club that had that bought some equipment and installed it kind of far from town. But me and my buddies discovered it and started riding our bikes there. I think I was like 17 at the time. And me being the guy always looking for the best, I actually ordered something called the Bulgarian Burst or Serious Growth training system by Leo Costa, which now that looking at it today is very similar to the way I'm still training. It was high frequency, moderate volume. Back then it was probably too much volume. But I did get off to a good start, I would say. But I was the only one that actually, I was consistent. I would ride my bike for 6 days per week for summer and winter. Didn't matter what the weather was. And it was like a half-hour bike ride each way. And I got horribly overtrained, obviously. I got some good gains, but like my friends would put in a fraction of the time in the gym and would have much better results than me. And again, now in retrospect, perhaps it was just putting in less time that gave them the best results. It's kind of funny to entertain that thought today, because I have gotten better results with a lot less training than I used to do back then.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, I was It was from the novice to the beginner to the intermediate stage, and I did get some pretty good gains. But again, what drove me to seek out the answers and information was that my friends would always, outgrow me, become stronger with less effort and time invested in the gym. And so I just, started reading studies, books, for weeks, months, and years. Every day I would be like a regular at the local library. Everyone would know my name basically because I would be in there and reading and taking books home. We didn't have the internet back then, so that was the
I was
only.
just about to say, you've just aged yourself there.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I'm 45 today, so obviously this was before the invention of the internet. And once the internet opened up and you had the discussion forums, I would just start sharing information about my perspectives on stuff. This was back in 99, 2000 or something. And people would resonate with that and start sending me messages. And that's basically when I started coaching people.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you've been coaching people now, obviously, for, closing in on 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. That's
so you've seen pretty much everything there is to see and worked through that. So there'll be some really really useful bits of information for people. So first of all, we would take it. You're not necessarily genetically gifted for putting on size. You would say perhaps, given your friends were growing even quicker than you, maybe they had. Well, I mean, of course, perhaps you were just doing too much. As you identified, that's a funny thought to think of, but quite often the best coaches and the best people at putting the theory together to get application for others are those that you've had to really think deeply about it and analyze what really works. So you would agree that that's been part of your journey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every time I would struggle with something, that's when I would start digging into various lines of research and information to learn more so that I could understand and get the big picture understanding of the body.
Is that like a trait that carries over to in all walks of life? If something interests you, you want to know like under the hood type thing, exactly what's
Definitely.
working. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same with cars. I'm the same with electronics. I'm actually an electronic engineer, computer engineer by education.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
you've probably
that's just my kind of thing.
Answered one of my last questions is always tell us something we don't know about you. Well, that was something almost certainly people don't know. So you've got to think of another option for later. But
I have one. So
okay, cool.
I'll save it for later.
So what I really want to talk about first of all is building muscle, and then how we can apply that in a kind of sustainable approach. But first of all, what really builds muscle?
I think a sufficient amount of tension is crucial. I'm actually, I have the PDF open right here, The Physiology of Strength by Hettinger from East Germany. This is from 1961.
Okay.
And it's a very interesting to look at the research they did back then. They used like thousands of different people and also athletes and looked at what worked and what didn't. And progressive loading is at the very foundation. And you need sort of your instantaneous 1 rep max. You need at least 30 to 40% of that load to make anything happen within the muscle.
Mm-hmm. So you have to be working at a sufficient intensity, and then, but once you're working at a sufficient intensity, there's a spectrum, a range of intensities you can work within to build muscle.
Yes.
So there's a sufficient tension. Now we talk about that maybe as a magnitude of tension, as in relative intensity compared to 1 rep max. Mm-hmm. Presumably, there's also a duration to some extent. The amount of tension the muscle is exposed to is a key element. Is that correct?
Yes, and the reason for that is that you need to tap into all of the motor units, the muscle fibers of the muscle. So at lighter loads, you need to work that muscle until the point of fatigue or failure. And I was, and I'm I'm pleasantly surprised to see that the term stimulating or effective reps has caught on these days, because I was actually the guy that coined that many, many years ago. I think back in 2004, 2005. And it was based on the exact same research that we're using today to determine whether a given set will actually stimulate muscle growth. And so you need to do not only a minimum threshold of tension, mechanical tension on the muscle, but according to the Hahnemann principle of muscle fiber activation, you need to work those lighter loads close to the point of failure, and the last 3 to 5 reps or so will be the ones that actually trigger the signaling for hypertrophy and muscle growth in the muscle.
Yes.
And the closer you get to your 1 rep max, the less the need for working to fatigue or failure. This is very specific to the individual muscle groups. There are some muscles that you reach 100% muscle fiber recruitment even at 50 or 60% of 1 rep max. But for most muscle groups, for the larger muscle groups, it seems that you need around 80 to 85% of your current 1 rep max, which is a load that most people can do 5 to 8 reps with, to achieve 100% muscle fiber recruitment. And at that point, you're getting 100% recruitment from the very first rep of a set.
Okay.
So those are the two main ways to achieve 100% fiber recruitment, and thus expose all of the muscle fibers of a muscle to sufficient amount of tension.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, you talked about effective or stimulating reps, which is a key concept for people to understand, and I think goes some ways to explaining why. Because obviously, volume is something that's big in the industry at the moment, and almost like more is better is the approach that a lot of people take. But understanding that even if you accept that more volume is better, you have to work sufficiently hard for that volume to be useful. Otherwise, It may be junk volume. So doing 1 million sets away from failure doesn't compensate for that intensity of effort.
Exactly.
Okay, good. So intensity of effort is maybe the first threshold you have to tick off, and then perhaps you then manage your volume after that. Also, you mentioned being quite high frequency training. I think there's another end of the junk volume spectrum, which is that within a session, after maybe a certain number of sets for a body part, doing more is not really adding any value. In fact, it's probably taking away from recovery. And so distributing your volume across the week is more important. So, of course, we've had the bros training everything once per week, and there's a general trend to shift, and it seems like 2 per week is the one a lot of people settle on. I believe that you might actually have a higher frequency approach and have found great benefit with that. Is that correct?
Yes, but still, it's very individual. Because what happens when you work to failure or close to that point is that you also generate some fatigue, and the residual fatigue will carry over until the next set, next exercise, and even the next day. And so, depending on your individual physiology, your rate of recovery, your current stress levels, nutrition, sleep, circadian rhythm, even, which has been a major point of interest for myself. With all of that framework in place, it generally requires at least 1 to 2 days of recovery before the CNS fatigue is back to a point where you can actually achieve full muscle fiber recruitment again. So there needs to be some balance there. So and you know, great minds are still disagreeing on whether higher frequency, less volume per session, and vice versa is the best way to go. But what we know is that as a novice and beginner, you don't really need to do a lot of volume to initiate the growth response and probably max out that growth response. But recovery from that fatigue and you know, in some cases, muscle damage does take a few days. So higher frequencies don't really do much of anything for novices or beginners. And as you get more advanced, the body gets better at directing, not only protecting the muscle from further damage. So you can tolerate more volume, but it also gets better at directing incoming nutrients to building muscle. So the whole process is more effective and more rapid. So in theory, at least, you would definitely see that the rate of recovery improves as you get better trained, and you're able to repeat the same type of workout, and even with a progressive increment in loading sooner than an intermediate or beginner. So higher frequencies do make sense for more advanced. And I guess I was one of the first to actually introduce this into the bodybuilding or fitness world, simply because I firsthand saw, not firsthand I would say, but I talked to the guys behind the Norwegian Frequency Project. That's, infamous these days, because they never published it officially. They did like a public announcement of it and presented it at a couple of conferences. But these were like elite Norwegian powerlifters, and they're known throughout the world for producing extremely proficient powerlifters, and even in face of some of the most rigorous drug testing procedures ever known. With somewhat of a guarantee of drugs not clouding the picture here, the Norwegian powerlifters are known for doing very well in international competitions, doing high frequency training, where bench is usually trained 4 to 5 days per week. Legs are trained up to the same type of volume with squats 3 to 4 up to 5 days per week, deadlifts twice per week. And the Norwegian Frequency Project, where they compared 3 days per week training to 6 days per week, showed that both strength and muscle mass was far superior in the 6 days per week group.
Yeah, that was
that was sort of the confirmation, I guess, I needed for actually having tried this since the beginning of my training career, where I trained every muscle group at least 3 times per week.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that study sort of has mythical status now. It's one that, people all over the world are fascinated by. Now, so some of the things you've talked about there, I think you've got a guy listening to this who considers himself an intermediate or advanced. He's probably thinking now, hang on a minute, 100% muscle activation of the high threshold motor units, 5 to 8 reps, high frequency is great, Norwegian Frequency Project. I'm basically going to get in and smash heavy weights 6 days a week on the big compound lifts. Seems to me that might be a recipe for disaster. What are your thoughts on that? And in rep ranges for programming high frequency, is that something that lends itself perhaps actually, if we're talking muscle gain particularly, to slightly higher rep ranges? And how would you go about structuring a training week in that respect?
Well, so here's the main thing about the Norwegian Frequency Project. Elite powerlifters used to training a lot. And now compared to the 3 days per week training group, they had like 3-hour workouts. They're also known for having long rest periods. They're also known for doing sub-maximal training, never to failure, and doing like average intensities around 70 to 80% of our max. So this is all of these factors need to be in place if you want to use high frequency training. Because me having worked with a lot of trainees from different training levels and backgrounds, I can say almost guarantee that so here's the thing. Whenever you mention something that will work for very advanced lifters, that's perhaps 1% of the training population, even less. The other 99% will believe they belong to that 1% and adopt advanced training strategies that are way beyond their training level. And also you need to have all of your ducks lined up in a row if you are even if it would even be possible for you to recover from such high frequency and training.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I would say for most people, 2 to 3 times per week per muscle group is probably going to be for 95% of the people out there, the best frequency of training.
Okay, great. Yes, so it's a good point you make, that also something when people look at advanced lifters, rather than thinking what training got them there and what were they doing at my stage of development, they think what are they doing now?
Sure.
So you get that 2 to 3 times per week guideline. So as we said, we want to talk about efficiency and people being able to make good gains without having to dedicate their life perhaps to the expense of other things. And muscle building is a marathon, not a sprint. So
yes,
if people are thinking maybe not what's the least I can get away with, because that's probably the wrong mindset, but if I want to make good gains for a long period of time, which will maybe get me to where I would have got, but it perhaps takes ever so slightly longer. What sort of overall training volumes and frequencies do you think we're looking at?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because I just see these raging debates among the experts and also people that want to be experts, and what's the most optimal way to train to get the most rapid rate of gains. But I think everyone seems to forget that, how big are you going to get down the line? In 5 to 6 years, let's say that's the time it takes you to. I've been training for 30 years. I mean, unless you have a competition in the next 6 months or 12 months, what's the rush? What's the hurry? Mm-hmm. Why are we all chasing the most rapid rate of gains when that in and of itself means that you're probably going to be on the verge of overreaching and overtraining, and the risk of injury will increase dramatically. And so I think I tend to think of it, the Pareto principle. If 20% of your investment will give you 80% return of investment or 80% there, why would you quadruple that investment and effort in order to get just another 20%? If you are a competitor, then that may be worth it to figure out your maximum recoverable volume, as Mike Isertel has called it. But I think for most people, if you're planning to be in the gym for the next 5 to 10 years and still think it's fun to train and maintain your motivation, why not adopt more of a moderate approach to it? Okay, so let's say that you only get 80% of the maximum rate of gains, but you're able to recover faster, you're able to sleep better, you're able to spend more time with your friends and family and your business. Why not? What's the problem? Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, and like there's a lot of good research from the renowned high intensity trainer researchers like James Steele, James Fisher, and these guys have shown that one set to failure, as long as you're training hard and using a proper exercise form, in most people that will probably drive most of the gains from that single set. And at the selected frequency of 2 to 3 times per week, you're gonna spend maybe 30 minutes of effective training in the gym and still get 80% of the guys doing 5 to 6 times the volume. So I'm kind of thinking, well, if you love spending time in the gym and there's some underlying need to, chase maximum, then for sure go ahead. And this is the reason why I teamed up with Abel Chabai of Sustainable Self-Development, because what's sustainable? For most people with ordinary lives where life meets optimal all the time, then perhaps a more moderate approach. And of course, not everyone is able to push to 100% during that single set. Perhaps you're doing, I think for recovery purposes, staying 1 rep from failure is a good rule of thumb, and even 2 reps from failure. And to compensate for that, do another set or two sets. So 2 to 3 sets, 2 to 3 times per week will get you most of the way there. And enable you. I can guarantee you that you will be able to train for at least 5 years without any real problems of overreaching or overtraining.
Okay, so 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 3 times a week for each muscle group. We can't put a number on it, but in terms of like that's 85% of your gains, but it's going to be good gains that are sustainable. And
yes.
And as you said, there's kind of that diminishing returns. I think it's important for people to understand that if they want more, for whatever reason, changing your body is an emotional thing, and some people therefore they become stimulus junkies almost. That doing that more is okay, but they should go in with their eyes wide open to that scenario of twice the training doesn't equate twice the results. So I think
and also, make sure that everything else is in order. Make sure that you're sleeping well, that your stress is managed properly, and in today's world, the modern environment, our stress levels are sky high, and that will tend to double or even triple the recovery time for a single session. So keep all of those things in mind, and also for guys and girls eternally chasing the six-pack and wanting to stay lean as possible, you're not supplying sufficient nutrients for recovery or thyroid health, which is even more important. Your metabolism, your cell turnover, your regenerative capacities needs to be in order. Mm-hmm. And if all of those aren't spot on, then you can just forget about. And this is sort of the point, because we're looking at averages. In every study, you have high and low responders. And there's this sort of claim that always keeps coming up. Well, there was one study showing that low responders turned into at least average responders once they increased the volume. This was an endurance training study. Mm-hmm. No such thing has been found in hypertrophy and strength training. In fact, there's one good study showing that, and in this study, each individual were their own control. So one leg would train with high volume, the other leg with low volume. And in the low responders, they had a low response regardless of volume. Perhaps, one leg with the low volume would respond slightly better than the high volume leg, or vice versa. This was sort of just random. But a low responder was still a low responder. And the high responder was a high responder regardless of volume. Some high responders had better results in the low volume leg and vice versa. So there wasn't like really any clear pattern. And I think we need to stop looking at these studies where averages draw up or down the result or conclusion of a study, and teach people how to monitor their own response and how they can optimize their own training. Mm-hmm. But I think it's much better to start with a low volume so that you at least have some room to increase that instead of chasing the maximum and potentially risking getting injured or not getting any results at all.
Yeah, brilliant. I think there's some fantastic points there. The first one I think is key, is you mentioned stress and recovery, and it's your training creates the potential for adaptation for muscle gain, but your recovery will dictate if you reach that potential. And specifically with my niche, guys that are sort of skinny, struggle to build muscle, the non-responder or the hard gainer, that's one of the things that they actually let themselves down on. They think, I need more training, but actually they're not taking care of those recovery elements. So I think you're spot on there. And actually, I stole this phrase from someone else, but in many respects, I think hard gainers are better termed easy losers than hard gainers, because of that kind of that anxious, the nervous energy they kind of almost do. They don't sleep enough. So I think for any of you guys that are listening that struggle to build muscle, that's a key element. Have you got your ducks in a row away from the gym before you worry about more training?
I've had so many clients. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I've had so many clients where, we just put a basic food and training program in place, and then spent the majority of the coaching time, like 8 to 12 weeks, just working on their mental game and getting their lifestyle into place. And they've had, better gains in 8 to 12 weeks than in the last 8 to 12 years, because that was the missing ingredient. Just getting their stress handled and sleep optimized and you know, the framework that most people tend to ignore. So that's I would say even more important than micromanaging, doing whether you should do 3 or 4 sets.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Micromanaging is the perfect term. I think people micromanage their training, yet they wing their recovery and nutrition, and that's, you know, completely wrong, and it is shooting themselves in the foot. And if only they could pay sort of just some of that attention to the other elements, they do a lot better.
Exactly.
So I think that's a key point, and also for quality of life. If you're micromanaging these details, you're giving up something else. So
and a final point I want to make, and this is also at a page I'm looking at in Hettinger's Physiology of Strength, where they observed time and time again that the high responders were also the ones that down the line, 3 to 6 months down the line of rapid gains, tended to stagnate and even regress. Simply because you have connective tissue and joints that don't have the same plasticity, ability to grow as quickly as muscle. So muscle is one of the more plastic tissues that are able to grow in size, double, even triple in size in some models. But connective tissue and joints cannot keep up with that because it doesn't have the same blood flow and regenerative capacity. So if you keep chasing the most, and this is again a problem because most studies run for 12 weeks at the most, 8 to 12 weeks, and you see these amazing growth rates. But what happens to these guys in 6, 9, 12 months? Are they still able to grow at that rate? I seriously doubt it. Are they injury free? I seriously doubt it.
Yeah, well, again, it kind of feeds into the catchphrase of everything works, but not everything works forever. Like if you take a nuclear approach to your training, you might get that short-term super compensation, but it's not gonna last forever. Okay, yeah, so that's very interesting. Also, I don't, you know, with your thoughts on the research. Obviously, it's great to be getting this research, but we don't know what the person's doing away from the gym. I've always questioned hypertrophy-based research. If they're not really closely monitoring that guy's nutrition, stress recovery, is it that the protocol they were on let them down, or is it the fact that they would have responded great to that, but they didn't have these other variables? And it's just this whole element we can't address. And so I think you have to be open to the research, but still skeptical about what it's showing. Okay.
And it's funny because we treat our bodies in a certain way where, you know, we keep pushing for maximum, and no one would want to spend their money that way.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you invest your money? Do you like just blow it all on one horse? In that case, you're a gambler. You're not an investor. So why not just do it smart and you know, monitor and adjust and you know, have some room for, you know, don't put all of your savings into one stock or a certain portfolio, and start spreading the risk.
Yes. Yeah, actually, as a takeaway point, like from this whole conversation, that's a really valuable thing for people to understand. Think of it as an investment. And I love that analogy, and not being a gambler with it. So that's brilliant. Yeah. I think really useful. Okay, I want to get into some kind of details. This is partly just sort of my interest in your opinion on these things.
Sure.
First one is rep ranges, and within whatever terminology someone's listening is using, you know, the macro cycle, meso, if they're using those terms, or just within their program at a time. The concept of having a broad spectrum of rep ranges people promote, and some people therefore mean that within a session, within a training week, they have a really wide spectrum. Now, I know that from earlier on, some teaching I had when we're talking about sports performance, you want to keep, for want of a better term, like a clear or clean signal, so the body knows what adaptation it's being asked of, and and it makes that response. If you have that really broad spectrum of rep ranges, people think they're doing everything possible to build muscle. I always wonder, are they actually doing too much, shooting themselves in the foot? They're not being specific enough, and they're better maybe phase on phase. You have that progression or change in rep ranges. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, those are some excellent questions. Because this is a topic I've been wondering myself, and I do see divergent responses in individuals from high reps versus moderate versus low reps. And some are naturally drawn to more low rep training. I mean, some powerlifters I worked with, 5 reps in a set for them is high rep training.
Yeah.
So it's all related to your individual preference, and we even have some good studies showing that people who can self-select their exercises, self-select their rep ranges, have better results than ones forced to train in a certain exercise or rep range. And even though we have these studies showing that regardless of intensity within a certain range, like 40 to 80% of 1 rep max, the hypertrophy is pretty much the same. We also have studies looking at linear periodization, where increasing from high reps and low loads to low reps and high loads outperform reverse linear, meaning that you go the other direction. And I think if you don't really know yet, perhaps starting off a program with light loads, high reps, gradually progressing through different rep ranges and loads. This is like the foundational premise of hypertrophy-specific training, which was the inspiration for the Sustainable Self-Development Program as well. I am a friend of Brian Haycock, and I truly respect the work he has done. And after doing that one training cycle, you will probably get a certain feel for what muscle groups or exercises respond better. You can almost see that. Let's say that your back, your chin-up strength, for me at least, my chin-up strength responds way better in low reps. So I can do 3 reps in that load almost forever. If I try to bring up my body weight strength, that just takes months and years. Nothing happens. And my chest is more of a high rep responder kind of thing. In most people I've coached, it's the opposite. Low reps work better for chest and triceps. And then again, my triceps are more, responsive to lower reps. So I think getting a certain feel for that, using combination of compounds and isolation exercises, and just monitoring what happens and even what you enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. That's a good study that seems to be brought up very, not frequently enough, in my opinion. It was Bevan et al. In 2006, where the subjects were tested in 4 different protocols. 1 explosive training protocol, 1 high rep, 1 moderate, 1 low rep. And based on how they tested, meaning their cortisol and testosterone response, salivary cortisol and testosterone, a measure of their stress. And those who tested low in cortisol and high in testosterone on a certain training protocol were placed in that training protocol, and vice versa for the other group. And halfway through the study, they switched. And what they saw was that the people that had a high testosterone and low cortisol response to a certain rep range also had the best gains when they followed that protocol. And then when they switched into the one they tested highest cortisol was testosterone, they stopped growing or even lost some muscle. Mm-hmm. Now, this was like all over the map. So some people responded better to low, some to explosive, some and blah, blah, blah. But the interesting thing is that most people also preferred, like they enjoyed the training they also had the best response to, which makes a lot of sense, because if you hate high rep squats, you will probably overproduce cortisol to that and not a lot of testosterone. So again, we're back to individual preference. And I think, like, I've spent probably the last couple of years or more trying to teach people how to listen to their instinct and intuition. And if they don't have any, then let's go through different types of foods and training protocols and see what you prefer doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's right. A lot of people probably listening to this are thinking, oh, that's great, but I have no clue. I haven't got that instinct and intuition, which I suppose in that respect, either you have to invest the time to develop it, or you can fast track that process. Work with someone who maybe is ahead of you a little bit on that journey and can look for some of those signs and guide you.
So my chosen way to test people is to first of all figure out or estimate the 1 rep max, and then I do a work capacity test. I know Man Hanselman's does the same thing, like 50% of your 1 rep max, 2 sets to failure, and just from that you get some information. So let's say your one rep max is 100 kilos for simplicity, and with 50 kilos you're able to do 30 reps on the first set and 20 reps on the second. Now that tells me that you have a pretty lousy work capacity because you can't reproduce the number of sets from a number of reps from set to set, but you're able to do a lot of reps with 50% compared to the average, which would be like around 18 to 22 or something, 25 perhaps. But then you have others, like for me, if I do that test, I can do like 12, 13 reps on the first set, maybe 14 if I'm lucky. And on the second set, I can do like 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I have both a poor work capacity and I'm, fast twitch, explosive. I've always been like that. So for most exercises, for me, I can keep doing sets of 5 and progress fine with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is kind of funny because I invented a high rep training protocol, Myo-reps. So,
yes.
But, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yes.
So spend like 80-90% of your training time where you perform better, and then 10 to 20% building the weakest link in the chain.
Okay, interesting. Yes, I think that's fascinating, and that work capacity element. Last week I interviewed Menno, and we discussed a little bit about work capacity and how that can have implications for obviously the rep ranges maybe, but also the total volumes that specific muscle groups can perhaps handle and respond best to as well. He was saying that work capacity he finds useful for tracking that. And I think another key element you've talked about here is that adherence and enjoyment. A plan's only as good as your ability to adhere to it, and whatever the best scientific program, if you could come up with such a thing, is no good if it's not executed with really high effort levels. And so getting that buy-in of the individual, and so if you love your program and work hard on it, that's probably the fundamental factor. All the scientific stuff on top of that takes you to the next bit of progress. But first of all, you have to work hard and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, excellent point.
Especially if you want it to be sustainable.
Yeah. That's what it all comes back to. I mean, if you love training and you want to do it for a few years, then figure out something that enables you to actually do that for a few years.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned Myo-reps. I want to get onto that, but before we do, there's something you mentioned Brian Haycock and his hypertrophy specific training, which I remember. This has been around for ages, right? I remember back when I first started training, my dad printed it out for me and gave it to me. All right, it looked great, but I had one problem with it back then, which was there was these I think he called it detraining, but there was like maybe
deconditioning, strategic deconditioning.
Yeah, and I was like, that's crazy. So I'm going to do the program. I'm going to ignore that bit because I was 17 and detraining made no sense.
Yeah.
Now I've been doing this a little bit longer. I'm a bit older, longer in the tooth. I kind of like the idea of maintenance phases with my clients. I don't call them maintenance because no one likes that, so I call them primer phases, just trying to sell it a little bit to them. But essentially, the idea is very low volume. We focus on some strength work. We don't do too much. We just do the minimum effective dose to try and resensitize to some future muscle gains. I know it's not identical, I don't think, but it's a similar concept, and I found it invaluable. So what's your experience with that? Are you a fan of these kind of resensitization or deconditioning phases for long-term growth?
Yeah, I just tend to not do them as often as Brian advised. I might train for 12 to 16 weeks uninterrupted and then perhaps do like a week of rest or something. Because I tend to think that we should try to figure out the sustainable volume and progression and troubleshoot whenever something doesn't work. So switch the exercise, try a different rep range, try double periodization like heavy light. Just sort of try to figure out add volume if that's needed. But at a certain point, because this is probably one of the most controversial aspects of it, whether you should actually rest to get better results. And as far as we know from the research, at worst, you get the same results. So we still don't have any good data showing whether taking it easy, like resting completely or taking it easy, would improve results compared to someone training continuously. But I tend to think for sustainability and for just the psychological effects and making sure that you're well rested and recovered, everyone who is a smart trainer and coach makes their trainees take some easy periods to
Yeah,
to recover.
yeah. So it's interesting. So I would agree, and actually, some complete downtime from the gym I think is very beneficial. But I found a harder sell. So, for example, when someone goes away on holiday, usually that's fine, and most people I work with go on holiday, once per year for a week to 2 weeks, for example, and then over Christmas they get that. So they get their natural. Maybe we're looking at 3 weeks where they don't touch a weight. The rest, if I want to put another one, say I just have one more phase where I want in a year. If I tell them you're not going in the gym for a whole week, they really struggle. They really struggle.
Yeah.
So then I have a slightly longer phase, which is just low volume. So 3 to 4 weeks, very low volume.
Makes sense.
Okay, and as far as you're concerned, there's no that we know of sort of physiological reason why that would be detrimental, and they need to just completely rest for a week. So if they're low volume but still the sets are challenging, but it's a low overall workload. Do you think that still has that effect, that resensitization and deconditioning effect, or do you think they need to actually just not touch a weight for the whole week?
I think what's mentally best for the client is also best for the program. And even though it was better, even though, you do get a resensitization effect from complete rest, but you don't from doing low volume. I mean, even then, you're still gonna only be as big as your hormones or genes allow. So, we're kind of back to the micromanaging aspect of things. If you're going to do this for a few years, I think getting a week of rest during Christmas and your vacation, and then having a couple of times a year, 1 or 2 times per year, where you're just doing low volume or body weight training or, whatever, calisthenics, whatever works for you. Okay. I think that's the best strategy for most people.
So first of all, we can put everyone's mind at rest. They're not going to lose all their gains if they miss the week a week from the gym, and then
not at all.
Potentially they're actually making a really good investment in their overall progress. So, okay, cool. Glad we discussed that, and I think I got me guilty of going into some micromanagement there. So thanks for checking me out.
We all do. So don't worry about it.
So talking about Myo-reps. So one of the things that you probably first brought you to the attention of a lot of people was this approach, stimulating reps, and how you specifically structured things within Myo-reps to achieve that. So firstly, could you give us an overview of what Myo-reps are, and then maybe we'll have a little bit of discussion how to apply them best to your individual situation.
Yeah, so it's based on the same principle we started talking about, which is achieving maximum muscle fiber recruitment. And to do that, as long as, like, Myo-reps, I think shines at least 10 rep max and higher, so higher reps. And so to get 100% recruitment, you would work to failure or close to it. But instead of resting for 2 to 3 minutes and sort of restarting the process, having to do 10 to 15, maybe 20 reps to achieve the final 3 to 5 reps of being stimulating, you just do a short rest period. I tend to do 3 to 5 deep breaths to keep things simple, and then do another 3 to 5 reps. So you're sort of balancing on the point of fatigue failure there to enable all of the reps to be stimulating or effective. Mm-hmm. So you're just sort of compressing 3 to 5 normal sets into a single set.
Yes.
So it's a classical rest pause technique, but you don't chase fatigue. That's sort of the main point.
Yeah, and it seems to me that one of the key differences is that slightly higher repetition bracket to start from. So like rest pause training, I remember there was it was called extended fives. You'd hit about a 5 rep max rest, and then you try and get like just a couple more reps through a couple of rest pauses. And Myo-reps, similar concept, but just starting out at a higher starting point in overall sort of reps. Okay, so can you maybe explain why the Myo-rep system for hypertrophy has some potential benefits over a lower rep rest pause approach?
Well, I wouldn't say if you compare it to a low rep approach, simply because then you have higher mechanical tension, and at that point, if you're already using loads that have inherently higher muscle fiber recruitment, you don't actually need to work close to failure at all. You could do just like a cluster rep type training, doing sets of 3 or something with a sufficient amount of rest between so that you're able to keep doing sets of 3. You could even do singles, but at that point you would probably need to do like 10 to 15 singles, and takes a lot of time, and it doesn't necessarily, like, we still don't know whether metabolic stress is needed. We just know that, well, at least it enhances muscle fiber recruitment at lighter loads, but whether it's a separate signaling pathway, we still don't know. It's a point of contention. But I do think there's something about Myo-reps that we still don't really know why it works as well as it does. And I've had clients that were used to training heavy, that were used to training straight sets, and then just start doing 1 or 2 Myo-rep sets, and suddenly they started growing again and getting stronger. So something is going on there. I've discussed this with Matthias Wernbaum, who's probably most known for his like gigantic meta review, frequency, intensity, volume, back in 2006, I think, again. And he has also done a lot of research into occlusion training, blood flow restriction training, and he's been working at the Norwegian Olympic Center with elite powerlifters and Olympiads, like Olympic athletes. And they have seen some very impressive stuff going on with both blood flow occlusion training, but also he has studied specifically Myo-reps, since you sort of emulate some of the occlusion effect simply by keeping rest periods so short and keeping all of the metabolic stress and pH value and all of that stuff. That some of it we still don't know what's going on there. But there are spikes in muscle fiber activation that outperforms doing straight sets with heavy loads, for one thing. And you only see these spikes after repeated Myo-reps. So after the first activation set, you get a certain muscle activation, but it still doesn't reach the same level as lifting a heavy load would. But after the second or third mini set in the Myo-rep series, you get spikes in muscle activation that goes even higher than traditional straight sets with heavy loads. So I don't really know. Perhaps it's doing a lot of stimulating effective reps within a shorter period of time. Yeah. Because like a typical Myo-rep set will require maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and doing the same amount of effective reps with straight sets with rest periods in between would require 10 to 15 minutes. So I don't really know yet what's going on, but something is going on, and some of my clients have just responded amazingly well to that. Perhaps there's something going on with satellite cells, where the activation and response to that metabolic stress and that type of stimulus reignites progress, like it donates myonuclei to the muscle fibers and sort of improves or enables that muscle to grow again once you start stimulating with higher loads again. I really don't know, but we've had advanced powerlifters do blood flow occlusion training, and also some of them do Myo-reps training. And these are guys that haven't really grown in the muscle, like increased their weight class in a few years, and they're lifting like 200 kilo benches and 300 kilo squats. So it's not a lack of loading, mechanical tension, but after a 2 to 4 week phase of blood flow occlusion training or Myo-rep training, they start growing again. They start growing muscle again. Yeah. And there's no published study on this yet. Well, I think they actually have one published study just recently. But something is going on, and I do prefer to have some 1 to 4 week phases of Myo-rep training every 6 to 12 weeks for most people, just as a rule of thumb or overarching guideline here. And sometimes after a week of rest, just do 1 or 2 weeks of a higher up straight set training, so just really low volume to get back into things. Then 1 to 2, maybe up to 4 weeks of Myo-rep training, which is quite intense, because that type of training does really require a lot of recovery. You can't do it every day, even if it seems like, okay, these are light loads and low volume, but they will beat the crap out of you. Mm-hmm. And then you transition into heavier loads and straight set training.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, certainly I can vouch for their effectiveness. I've used them myself and with clients, and they have worked very well. And thanks for those overarching guidelines of how you program them in. Because actually, anecdotally, I found that roughly a 4-week period of them is incredibly effective. Seems to have great results. And whilst if you don't know exactly what's causing it, then certainly I don't know. But it seems that there's just this beautiful combination of a high amount of volume at sort of stimulating threshold, an effective rep threshold that you get, and as you say, in a really time efficient manner. So whilst cluster training can be great, you do so many sets, it take a lot of time. But also, I just feel that they beat you up so much that it's not repeatable, whereas you can you can run the Myo-reps for 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. Okay. Brilliant. So yeah, they're a powerful tool, and one that I think definitely, if you haven't experimented with, you should give them a go. Quickly before we move, I know we're running close up on time here, but I think it's important. Myo-reps, I've never done them with squats or deadlifts. Presumably, there is some certain exercises you feel lend themselves better to Myo-reps. Could you quickly give the listeners some insight there?
Yeah, that's a funny point, because Mike Tuchscherer, I don't know if you know who that is, but he's like a world-class lifter and produces world-class lifters, and he regularly does Myo-reps on both squats and I don't think he does it on deadlifts, but
I don't know how he does that.
And I just see, like, I'm still a member of his Facebook group. I just see people hating on it, and my God, you're trying to kill me. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that sounds horrific.
But yeah, I would generally advise not using Myo-reps on exercises that use a lot of muscle mass. So they really shine on isolation stuff. Mm-hmm. They do, but you can get away with it on shoulder presses and benches, of course, if you have a spotter nearby. Because doing bench presses and Myo-reps and then you suddenly fail, not a good thing.
Yeah. Just make sure your spotter's paying attention.
Yeah, and then also doing dumbbells where you need to get them into place and stabilize, and you sort of waste too much energy just getting them into position compared to the actual training. So machines, isolation work, leg presses, that kind of stuff. It's probably more conducive to this type of training since it's so intensive on the cardiovascular system.
Okay, fantastic. Yes. So some useful takeaways for people there. Now we're almost running out of time. I don't want to use up too much of your day. I know you're busy, so we'll just transition. I've got a couple.
I have a vacation, so I'm okay.
Oh, you go. Oh well, in that case, let's keep talking. But we'll shift over. We've got some more quick fire questions, just so people get to know a little bit more about you. Obviously, we need that answer to you telling us something we don't know about you, and then an opportunity for you to tell people where they can find out more about your stuff. So first up, let's kick off an either-or scenario here. So pizza or burger?
Burger.
Chocolate or peanut butter?
Chocolate.
You're on vacation, so beach holiday or city break?
Oh, God, difficult. I do prefer both, but probably nowadays beach holiday.
Okay, cool. If you're having a steak, is it rare or well done?
Rare.
Yeah. Menno is the only person who gave me any different answer to that so far. He just to be contrarian, I think he said medium well or something. Anyway, just and I think he was just being difficult. Right, eggs scrambled.
Sounds like
yeah, he was like, I can't just answer this too easily. Scrambled or poached?
Scrambled.
Okay, and now that opportunity to tell us something people probably don't know about you.
I'm psychic.
Psychic.
Well, to expand slightly on that, I've sort of coached people for many years, and I just sometimes would get feedback like, well, wow, no one ever told me that. How did you know that? And so I started becoming more interested in that kind of thing, like the more alternative approach and the more spiritual side, which is probably a natural transition from someone who's spent most of their lives being really obsessed about research and what you can prove. And then a lot of stuff happened that I just couldn't prove. Well, I'm not going to go into that. Let's do that another time. So I actually took 3 years of training or education into a school focusing on developing your intuition and your psychic abilities. So I just completed something called the Soul Spring Masterclass. So I'm actually able to do psychic readings with people, which was a mind-blowing experience even to me. Because
fascinating.
I just did like readings with some people that I've never seen before that would come into the room, sit in front of me in a chair and not say a word. And I would just spend the next hour telling them things about their own lives. And they would just, say afterwards, that was completely, effed up. I even named their son.
Wow. Well, you
showcase
that ability obviously by answering this question right at the start before I asked.
Yeah, and again, it's not something I'm gonna market myself as, at least not yet. But it's just it just shows that there's more between heaven and earth than we can probably understand. Mm-hmm. So I just keep that door open for now.
Cool, interesting. Yeah. And then the next question is, if I had access to anyone in the world, who should I interview next?
Donald Trump.
I'm sure he'd have some interesting take on training frequency.
Yeah. No, I think I've only heard like one good podcast with Brian Haycock, and I think he always has some very interesting insights on stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'll look into getting him on.
Yeah, because like now in looking at the recent research on high volume stuff, I know that he agrees on some of it and disagrees with some of it, but he kind of puts everything in a very good perspective, and him and Jeremy Lanica are probably some of my most favorite guys to follow.
Yeah. Jeremy Lanica has some interesting thoughts too. Certainly, I've heard. Read some of his papers and some podcasts with him, and certainly gets you thinking in a different manner. So I think
controversial.
Yeah, I think getting those guys on, because at the very least it gets you to question some of your beliefs about things. That taking their approach is very useful. So I'll definitely look into getting both of those guys on. Okay, so now give everyone the opportunity to find out a little bit more where they can find out about you and the services you provide.
Yeah, I've kind of just been doing my own thing for a while. So I have a Facebook page. I have a private profile where I don't really add people that I don't know. But my official business page is where I will sometimes post stuff. Not very often these days. But my homepage, borgefagerli.com, is the one where I have most of my material.
Okay, fantastic.
And even an article called Myo-reps in English, and I have a link to like my ebook, so you can purchase the ebook.
Yes.
From that.
Okay. All right, we'll put those links in, and basically, if people give you a Google, I'm sure they'll find stuff. You've written for Elite FTS as well, actually, as to
I've written for many. And I mean, you can go on YouTube and just search for Myo-reps, and you can see people doing them all over the world, and it's even part of the curriculum of several international personal trainer studies, and it's my proudest achievement, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Googling Myo-reps will give you plenty of material to work their way through. So I'll make sure we'll link those up. In that case, Borge, thank you very much for taking the time to chat to us today. It's been fascinating, and I think some really useful insight for people.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Yeah. Thank you.
That wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed what you heard and took value from it, please do me a favour by heading to iTunes right now, subscribing to the show, and leaving a review. Positive reviews, like 5 stars, hint hint, really help the ranking of the show and will help us to spread the word and keep getting top-class guests on. Make sure to follow Breaking Muscle on social media and me at Tom McCormick, that's TOMMACCORMICK on Instagram. Bye for now, and I'm looking forward to catching you on the next episode of the Breaking Muscle podcast.